Welcome back to the PHLY Eagles podcast, joined as we are every other Wednesday by Mina Kimes of ESPN. Mina, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for week 7.
Excited for week 7. Now, last we talked, the Eagles were undefeated, but we said
Mm.
things did not seem so great under the surface. And since then, 2 straight losses. What has been your view on what we've seen the last 2 weeks? And I guess especially sort of the decrepit performance against the Giants.
Decrepit. That's such a great word. I think that the offensive issues that they have been kind of avoiding, or at least, there's been a good half of offense and a bad half of offense, and then they flipped it, kind of came to a head. The defense, I'm a little bit less worried about, not a little, a lot less worried about. They lost their 2 best players against the Giants, right? And if anything, I think it just shows that this is a very top-heavy group, which we knew. I feel like that was the one doubt I maybe had about the Eagles going into the season, or my biggest concern was like, this is a stacked team. They're really talented, but there's a few load bearing players here. And if you take them out, particularly obviously the ones that they were missing against New York, becomes a serious issue. But the offense feels more like structural. Sorry, I don't know why I keep doing construction analogies. The
I think
offense
that's my
feels like
fault.
the bigger problem, and the one that they've really got to get figured out.
So where do we start, Mina? I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about how multi-layered the issues that the Eagles offense faces. I heard you and Stephen A. Shouting back and forth last week
No, I
about
missed this.
some of the things that ail the Eagles offense, and I specifically wanted to ask you about like the evolution we're seeing from Eagles or from defenses against the Eagles offense, the fire zones that you and Dan talked about. What are you seeing from that perspective? And again, just like generally, where would you start with this Eagles offense?
Yeah, the fire zones and the coverages they're seeing, and some of the predictability and the passing problem are all things that they need to address. But I think the fact that they're facing them and that they're thwarting this thing stems from the inability to run the ball, right? Because if they could run the ball, not even at the level they were last year, if they could run the ball at an above average level, then I don't think they would constantly be put in these passing situations. And this is when the Eagles offense was at its best. You guys know this obviously very well. They were a math problem for defenses. If you drop an extra safety to stop the run, then they can kill you in the one-on-ones. But if you play split safety or light in the box, they'll punish you on the ground. The problem is they're not punishing anyone on the ground right now. So I actually think if I'm Philadelphia, the inability to run is almost like what you really want to, like, you got to get that figured out right now. Because to me, it's sort of all flowing from there. And I will say, too, with this obviously very daunting matchup against a Vikings defense that basically measures in all of the things that are giving the Eagles pass game problems, the Vikings defense on tape has really struggled to stop the run over the last couple of weeks. Not just on tape. I always say on tape. That was so pretentious. Just generally, they've struggled to stop the run. You don't need to watch tape to see that. So there's an opportunity here for the Eagles and Saquon Barkley to take advantage of them on the ground. But obviously, it's one they haven't been able to do so far.
And what is particularly interesting here is something we've talked about on the show today, which is that there are a lot of things like the drama here is very familiar to Eagles fans. What is very unfamiliar to Eagles fans over the past decade plus is having an offensive line that is just mediocre and it's not injured. And I don't know what the explanation for that is. Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens are obviously banged up. Tyler Steen is a different kind of player than Mekhi Becton. He's not as powerful in the run game. Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson are not having their best seasons. I don't know what the answer for that is, but it does feel like they should have the horses there to be able to flip the switch. I don't have a reason why that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I think like all great things in the NFL get worse over time, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so
I think you
a
can
little
stop
bit is
in the
just
NFL, just
yeah,
period.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Mm.
it's good. Yeah, getting deep here. So I think inevitably it's like, yeah, we can't just beat up people the way they did a couple of years ago, last year too. But I think you could also ask whether or not the run scheme is doing the offensive line any favors. I was really struck by Lane's comments. I'm sure you guys have gotten into this on your show after the game, where he was pretty outspoken about feeling like the offense was too predictable at the moment, and This is something Dan's talked about a little bit on NFL Live, just the formational tells with Saquon, the lack of, obviously, the Eagles offense, they don't use a lot of motion, and the predictability, though, and down and distance. It's not just that the offensive line isn't maybe winning. It's that defenses know the run is coming. They know the type of run is coming. And crucially, this is something that I've been getting into a bit about live. It doesn't seem to me like they're afraid of Hurts as a keeper. And that's, so much of what the Eagles did with the gun run game was based on having a numbers advantage because linebackers had to either account for Hurts or get punished for doing so. And it doesn't feel like that's the dynamic right now. So if you don't have that, if you're, as a gun running team, if you're not able to beat them with numbers, you have to find other ways to create advantages and help your offensive linemen. I feel like they're not doing that right now.
And EJ, is your understanding, because listen, it's the same run game coordinator, it's the same personnel for the most part. This could be a Petulo thing. It could be a Jalen Hurts thing that he doesn't want to run as much. What's your read on it?
Yeah, I think the latter is something that's on my radar this week. I do wonder how Jalen factors into this, especially I feel like that is the thing that you always have to bake in with these things. Like Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts have been the constants. So I think the lack of quarterback inclusive run game that we've seen from the Eagles, I do think that it's a fair question to ask that if Jalen is a big part of that. Mina, something I wanted to ask you about, because I did watch the film of some of those explosive runs that the Vikings defense had. I saw the Falcons use pistol formations a lot with success to break off some explosive runs. And we've seen the Eagles use pistol, but the predictability has really kind of held that back, it seems like. So my question is how do you see the Falcons using pistol to kind of get advantageous run looks? And is it different than what we've seen from the Eagles?
Well, the Falcons, when they use pistol, they use a lot of motion to try to displace second level defense. They use motion across the board, but it is something that they're constantly doing. They're constantly sending guys back and forth in the backfield to just try to move defense. And then they're also occasionally giving it to actually make defenses respect those threats. So I think that's something that they've done exceptionally well. I would also say Bijan is a very unique runner with the level of vision he's getting from the pistol, as opposed from he is really, really good at himself individually setting up second level defenders and these little subtle things that he does. So that might be a little bit specific to him. But I would also add and this is not a scheme thing, the Falcons' offensive line is getting more push on these zone concepts than I see in Philadelphia. They're really, really playing well together. I mean, what they did against Buffalo was remarkable, given that they were losing their tackles, and they were still, I think the interior in particular played really well in that game. But they're really, really, really they're pushing guys around, moving as one. But yeah, I would say off the top of my head, they probably use motion on those pistol gun runs at the highest rate of any team in the NFL by a pretty significant margin. And the Vikings struggled with that, but the other thing to note, though, is they were missing their middle linebacker, Blake Cashman, who might be returning this week. That's something to monitor. I think that has they're also missing Harrison Smith, who's gone, who's not coming back. So I think that this Vikings defense is a little bit worse against the run than they were last year, maybe more than a little bit. And I think the absence of Cashman really compounded that.
Let's talk about the passing game matchup on this side of the ball, because you mentioned it. Listen, the Eagles have, the secret is out that these sim pressures are really getting to the passing game, and you can tell that there are times when the protection is they're keeping 7 guys in to protect, and they've just guessed wrong, and the defense is dropping 8. And this has happened multiple times. And Jalen Hurts is in charge of the protections. This is a thing that he acknowledges he has to improve at. But as you said, this is a defense that is probably going to give him more pre-snap issues than any defense in football. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's tricky. I went back to see when the last time Jalen Hurts played Brian Flores, and it was September 2023, right? So
early, yeah.
Yeah, but it was early, so it was kind of it was very early in the Brian Flores Vikings defense transformation. So and it was a bunch of different players, but I have a little bit of trouble over attributing too much to that game. But
yeah, they were. Yeah, I remember that game. They were still coming off a really low level of talent on defense. Cousins threw a couple interceptions in the red zone. Yeah.
And Flores was still figuring it out, and he started, I think, really leaning into a lot of the stuff that we see now, the sims and blitzes from the split safety structure, like, as the year went on, and he got really, really good at it. But yeah, I think it's so funny because I remember very distinctly ahead of the Super Bowl after the Rams game, noticing that he really struggled with some of this. The Eagles operation struggled with some of the sim pressures that the Rams were throwing at him, and then being a little bit surprised that they didn't, that Kansas City didn't lean into it more during the Super Bowl. But I would say, you have to look at what teams who have beaten this defense have done well. Detroit has been pretty successful against it, but there's been other quarterbacks, even like the Bears with Caleb Williams. There's been moments, and a lot of it is, first of all, running the ball really helps. I know it sounds boring, but like you want to be able to run them out of some of these pressures and obviously get into favorable down and distances. And because so much of the pressures come on earlier, some of the gamesmanship happens on early downs, right? But beyond that, like post snap, you have to see where the voids are in the defense. He has to be able to okay, this guy's coming, this guy's not. Usually, if you watch this Brian Flores defense, there is space to attack, but you have to have a quarterback who's able and willing to attack it, and also willing to challenge them over the top, right? Because they do leave themselves vulnerable to the deep ball at times. So it's a lot. It's a lot like on the plate of the quarterback. Actually, there's things that the play caller can do to help them out, and answers that he can give him, and the offensive line, obviously. But like you said, if you're leaving guys in to protect, and you only have a couple of options
Right.
in the passing game, I think being cognizant of where those voids are, where to attack, where they're vulnerable, and making sure you have skill players actually attacking that part of the field as opposed to just outside the numbers the way the Eagles play is going to be really important.
Well, that's right. It plays into the predictability because Brian Flores knows what to expect. And so he's going to leave the spots open that the Eagles don't usually attack.
Yeah.
Right. And so the Eagles are going to have to, zig when he's expecting them to zag. Go ahead.
So Mina, I've spent the whole mini bye like worried about a lot of the things that ail the Eagles passing game, the offense in general. But then I zoomed out and I watched Sunday's games and Monday night's games, and sort of realized like it seems like across the league there isn't one or two teams that are really running away with like the early Super Bowl contention flag here. So I'm curious, like, how do the Eagles' problems compare to some of the other teams at the top of the NFL through 6 weeks, and how it seems like there are a lot of imperfect teams that are sort of making up the list of contenders.
Every team is flat right now, right? So just staying in the NFC, obviously where the Eagles play, Cowboys have no defense. Commanders, who just lost, have a good offense, a good running game, but I think there's flaws in the offense and the defense. Defense in particular, you saw get just run on by Chicago. That really jumped out to me as being like, ooh, this could be a problem moving forward. The Rams have defensive issues too, and I think they just lost Puka Nacua. So that's an issue. The Bucks are, I think a lot of people would probably have them as the best team in the NFC right now, and I think that's fair. But if you dig a little bit into the advanced metrics, I think they're winning a lot of close games. They're getting there's things happening that could regress for them, no doubt. And I think defensively they have weaknesses in the passing in coverage as well. The Packers are, remain somewhat. I think they're like actually incredibly balanced, but they're still kind of flawed from an execution standpoint. The Lions have major defensive issues. You really saw that against Kansas City. I don't mean to be like boring and spell them all out, but just like every team does have like a legitimate flaw. So when I look at this Eagles team, I think that the defense, if they're healthy, is fine. I really do, if they're healthy. I know pass rush is a problem, and obviously you had the weird retirement thing, but they'll get Nolan Smith back, they'll get Jalen Carter back. Maybe you trade for a rusher, but I'm not terribly worried. I think coverage is good enough when those guys are healthy. Offensively, you got to get this figured out. It's almost good news though that it's not to be like Pollyannish, but like it's week 7. You got the whole season to figure this out. It would be worse, I actually think, if this was happening at the end of the year and like in the playoffs, right? And the offense, like they've got time to try to come up with solutions. They've come up with solutions in the past to problems on offense. But it is, like one of the great challenges of Nick Sirianni's coaching career.
Yeah, it does seem like being around in the building, it feels like these guys are like waiting for the inflection point. That last year it was like, they're going to become a run first team. Obviously Nick Sirianni handing over play calling a few years ago. It seems like they're trying to will that to happen.
Yeah. I'm a little bit more worried about the defense than both of you guys are.
We know.
But
we know.
Pass rush, or is it the pass rush you're worried about, or just the fragility of it?
It's all of it. Yeah. The pass rush and the coverage. I mean, they can't find a corner two. And I know they were without Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell in that game. But last year, this was a team that was like out physicaling everybody, and they were just getting blown off the ball. They did not look like a physical team.
Yeah.
Maybe you wave that away as a short week, but it just felt like the kind of thing that the dam could break here. Do you have a unifying theory as to why it does feel different that every team is flawed through 6 weeks? Is that just being a prisoner of the moment?
I think that if I had to put my finger on it, maybe like the teams with really great quarterbacks that have paid those quarterbacks a lot of money have not been able to compensate for it elsewhere on their roster. And then the other teams are still trying to figure out the quarterback position, maybe. I don't know. That might be it if I had to go, right? Like, because I think most of the teams that I mentioned with defensive problems have expensive quarterbacks, expensive offenses. So that could be it, perhaps. And I think like there's a lot of young quarterbacks on rookie contracts who are good, but they're not the best quarterbacks in the league right now.
Before you go, we should ask you very quickly. We don't know who's going to start for the Vikings at quarterback, but what should we expect from that offense?
I know. I was just looking this up from my own podcast. By the way, check it out, Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. We will preview and pick this game.
What's the deal? You have is a new page or something?
Philadelphia. I finally launched a show Instagram, so you can follow that Mina Kimes Show. We're going to do power rankings by Lenny every week there. Exclusive Lenny content. The number one complaint I get about my podcast is there's not enough Lenny. So there you go.
That's Julia's
complaint as well. One of those people complaining. We need more Lenny. Yeah.
It's routinely the number one YouTube comment I get. So we will preview and pick this game. You can hear us discuss it in detail. And if you want to go check out
Good tease
to win, go check out the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. But anyway, so I was just looking up the Vikings quarterback thing, and I kind of like threw up my hands at one point. I was like, does it matter?
Right.
It does matter. I think it's going to be JJ McCarthy reading the tea leaves. So I was kind of like trying to read all the beat reporters and listen to what they were saying. But that makes it almost harder to, I wouldn't say it makes it harder per se, but like whether or not the Vikings offense can be functional to me just comes down to whether or not JJ McCarthy can bring down that time to throw at all, because right now it's pretty brutal. So remains to be seen. I don't think from the Eagles standpoint, there's a clear advantage or disadvantage in facing either quarterback, though, to be honest.
The emotional.
Right, exactly.
The Wentz revenge.
It's almost like there's nothing that could go worse than losing to Carson Wentz. So like let's avoid that possibility.
That could definitely spark a meltdown in Philadelphia.
All right, Mina Kimes, go check out the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. Get the followers up on that Instagram. Thank you very much, Mina. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Mina.
Bye, guys.
Back with more on the PHLY Eagles podcast.